This is Agronomy Moment. I'm Wendell Cohen.
Hey, good day, everybody. We are going to come back here with this Agronomy Moment podcast again and give you a quick update here. Not a lot, in a sense, has happened over the last month because of the dry weather. I mean, planting conditions started out fairly benign, I would say, not a lot of drama. Our biggest story, I think, as we look at going forward is, it's what we've had is our biggest story would be our cold weather. And that it's been in some areas have been really dry. So just wanted to.
There was some water falling from the sky.
Yeah, I did hear something like that. I thought maybe we were being attacked.
What was that?
Yeah, I know. I thought maybe we were being attacked by some foreign gas.
Substance.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. It wasn't just me. All right.
Yeah. In some places they call it rain.
Okay.
So.
Right. Thank you for familiarizing me with that term.
Well, I know we've been so long. I just was thinking when we were out in the warehouse preparing our project today that I heard it on the metal roof and I was like, that'd sound really good just to hear a good long rainy day for once, just a good soaking rain. So
heck yeah.
Prayers to people who need it.
Yep.
And hopefully. Let's jump into the first thing though, talking about our weather and going forward, we're going to be thinking about nitrogen potentially. You may have had it on pre-plant. You might be thinking what I do now with the top dress and where do we go from here? So Selena, help me understand what's some thoughts here as it relates to, I'm thinking another week or two, what could be looking at with corn growing?
So right now, I just like to kind of think about the immobilization in the soil with it being so dry. We have not much microbial activity happening due to extreme dry conditions or more dry conditions than what we are used to seeing. So we think about probably once these plants get big enough, if our weather pattern doesn't change, we are probably going to see nutrient deficiencies. Most specifically relating in this case, in this podcast, to nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus. All of those will be shown in the lower leaves, the older tissue of the corn plants. And I just, going forward, we're thinking about potentially our typical top dress or side dress applications and, maybe our thoughts towards that and what happens if we had adequate nitrogen there. Do we still need to top dress or side dress, whatever application method you use there? And so I think that the agronomist answer is always going to be, it depends. So
we'll see.
We know the weather can change in the blink of an eye. And preparing ourselves and having the conversation, or at least the thoughts going through our head about, okay, what are we going to do if this weather pattern continues? What are we going to do if it turns off to be a more fair year or a wet May like we are typically used to seeing? Are we going to have enough nitrogen there?
Yeah.
That nitrogen deficiency, whenever the soil is re-wetted, whenever the root system is a little bit bigger, we typically see more recovery from the plants. So as far as the top dress, side dress, that's kind of where my mind's going. And if you're going to continue to go forward with a top dress urea application or AMS, potentially making sure you're using a stabilizer to protect that input there and, protect volatilization in case we do continue to see some drier weather patterns, and having that peace of mind that there is stabilization there and it will sit there for longer without losing.
And our state of mind, it typically would be with cooler and drier weather is anything that's been incorporated into the soil and has a good bond to the soil is still there, is largely there. I mean, we're not looking at obviously losses this year like we have.
Yeah, typically we think about our losses when it's wet.
Yes.
We get washing rains or we get enough rainfall that it's no question as
Yep.
to we're gonna have to put more nitrogen out there.
Yep. So, I mean, one could consider, I guess, if one can hold, I was thinking maybe if you could hold your fire, and which I think people aren't really top dressing yet, but if you can hold your fire a little bit longer to make that decision, but be ready because if all of a sudden we get wet in the next 2 weeks and then we get to the end of May, spreaders are going to be hard to come by. And so it's not like you want to ignore it either.
Right. Yeah.
You know.
I agree with that.
Anything else to add on this part here? I think we need more time. We need heat.
Yeah.
And we need some moisture.
We need to pray for patience and we need to pray for rain.
Right. Sure. Yep.
So that's kind of the two main things is just hold on and see what happens.
And I think yesterday's heat, I noticed a huge difference in the crop. And ones I was seeing, corn by evening was looking a lot, to me, I can notice differences.
There was a lot of differences in soybeans from what I saw as well to that point is the heat and the sunshine. Definitely more beans popping out of the ground after we're kind of sitting here wondering and are these beans going to come up? And they did. A lot of them that I've seen in the past day have popped.
So let's hope for some showers of rain and increased heat. So talk about frost a little bit. I'm going to adjust the camera view down to the whiteboard we have here with our corn, and we're going to talk a little bit about frost on corn. And then we did a study here at our warehouse with downforce and depth of the planter. We're seeing some interesting things with roots. But first off, let's talk about frost.
Yeah, so we've seen some frost, of course, and some damage in corn, and we have a good example showing what some frost recovery is going to look like. And for the majority of the plants that I have seen, the corn is overcoming and recovering from those frost conditions. And these plants are a little bit younger, but plants that might be a little bit farther along still had their growing point below the ground. So, and the growing point was okay. It was live and healthy. It just took a matter of digging those plants up, cutting them in half and seeing where that growing point was. So in this specific example here, we went out to the agronomy plot here at Wendell's and pulled a couple of frost damaged plants to kind of represent maybe what you could be seeing. This is very, very familiar to a lot of the frost, what I would say recovery in a lot of cases that I have seen in the field. These plants just kind of, fusing together some of those leaves, and we're waiting to see if that old tissue will, like here and here will kind of, well, in this case it's up here, will rot away and the new growth separate from that. And so I believe that in these cases, these plants will probably overcome this just fine. If you're seeing this in your field and would kind of like to track the progress on it, I would recommend getting a little metal flag and just sticking it out there at these plants, and you can monitor them that way. But again, most of what I have seen is the recovery from here and it pulling away and growing. And then also one thing we can look at as far as new growth in the whorl. And whenever we see that new growth in the whorl, trying not to completely destroy the plant, but I mean, it's dead at this point. No hope for survival at this point because it's out of the soil. But yeah, we can just see in that whorl there that there's new growth that has come and it's continuing to push. And
so far, we're not really seeing on the ones we've been noticing, I'm not seeing a problem. Corn is continuing to look, the whorls continue to look healthy, and the growing point as it's coming forward.
Yeah, we have had some windy days, which has probably helped a little bit. So yeah, right here, that's just what we hope to happen is have those leaves just continue to push and unravel and look like a normal corn plant, and got a whorl there and new growth down there. And Similarly with this one, I would say this one is a little bit less extreme than
Yeah.
that example was, and just it usually pulls off pretty easy. So there's really high winds
Have been
or
a
windy
help.
days have probably helped these plants a little bit.
The other thing to remember, if these cases aren't as extreme, but if you're in a case where your corn was frosted completely off or laid over and you got new growth coming, remember when you're applying a herbicide and wondering about label limits, it's a V. It won't look like a V5 corn. You won't be able to use leaves.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have to stage it by cutting it
Cutting
open.
it open and looking at the nodes.
I have some past videos on that in case you are wondering how to stage your corn. Go to my YouTube channel or the podcast and scroll back a year or so, and I've got some
I will
videos.
say that the corn is looking progressively better and
Mm-hmm.
overcoming that frost considerably well in comparison to soybeans. Some early planted soybeans
Yep.
that were emerged just didn't have as good of a luck. And obviously, that is very dependent on how long the frost was, what area you were in, as far as geography, and where that field sets, as far as either low lying or up on a hill. I mean, there's just
Yes.
lots of factors that play into that. Planting date, of course, too. But I have seen some soybeans that have there's no point of return for some of them that just hypocotyls or their necks, whatever you want to say,
Yes.
just brown and squishy.
Yep.
That's not what we want to see.
Yeah.
So
They're definitely a ruptured cell walls.
luckily, our corn crop looks like it's going to be okay.
Let's talk a little bit about what we've seen here in the plot here with this depth study. We can move this here a little more centered here.
So this is
We were going to do this out in the plot today, but it was showering around a little bit, so that's why we're doing it here.
yeah. So we just dug up some of the plants from the plot, and this is we originally were looking kind of at down pressure, but as it relates to down pressure, also planting what ended up being kind of planting depth also. And so with let's see, with this plant over here is we took all of the downforce out of the planter. So that was planted with no downforce, and which ended up resulting in about maybe a quarter of an inch into the soil as far as depth. It was just
right under the soil surface, which you can see. This is your soil surface line here, the black line, and then you see your seed.
Mm-hmm. And then we had a normal planted, we dug up a normal planted 2-inch depth plant, and we can see the root system there, how important it is to key in and make sure that our planters are set right and planting at the correct depth. In this case,
and proper downforce.
So that was a really cool comparison there with the amount of root growth that we see comparing those two plants. And then transitioning to this plant right here, we also have a depth study going on out there, and this plant was actually planted at 3 inches deep.
Yes.
And also you can see the, I guess, hindrance and like the first plant, the hindrance on the root system in comparison to a normal 2-inch planted corn seedling.
Yeah, you can see a lot more elongation of the 3-inch planted, how it has a lot more of a stalk that's wider, indicating it was below ground.
Mm-hmm.
One thing's interesting though. Do you notice how the was planted at 2 inches now looks like 1 inch?
Yeah.
And the one that's planted at 3 looks like 2.
Yep.
So remember this when you are planting. Like I know the 1/4 inch over here is pretty extreme, but remember when you're planting at 2, you probably won't end up.
Mm-hmm.
You won't end up there
Mm-hmm.
because of rains and compression of soil, and it was worked right. So over time.
Yeah, just and down pressure, how important that is.
Yes.
As far as and Wendell can maybe attest to that this year a little bit. And maybe the conditions you were planting your corn in and the conditions you're planting your soybeans in, and the downforce or down pressure settings that you've got might need to be tweaked a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. It's well worth checking behind your planter. Another thing I've noticed with downforce that can change is soil types.
Mm-hmm.
A big deal there, and especially if you're going back and forth and you have multiple soil types in one pass.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the tendency sometimes is, well, I can't match it all anyway. I was being told by an equipment dealer the other day, though, he mentioned is when you get into conditions that are the smallest part of it, that requires more downforce instead of just increasing it, which ends up in compaction in the greater part.
Yep.
He says sometimes just slowing down. You might need to slow down to that 4.5 miles an hour, or 4 or whatever, through a short period of time if you want to keep it with the proper contact and depth.
Right.
So, it's just the more you think about the planning process, the more one has to understand what's going on as that planter is trying to roll over that ground.
Yeah.
And there's a lot going on.
And this year we've had plenty of time to plan our crops. It's been wide open. Unfortunately, haven't had a rain to stop us.
But anyway, anything else you want to add to this? I want to say is hopefully this summer we'll keep watching this plot, these projects. We got other ones going on out there that are still taking place. We'll probably bring guys in, so stay tuned. We'll try to maybe put out a few videos on some stuff we're doing.
Maybe next time we'll have some beans.
Yes.
Some beans emerged, and be able to kind of showcase a soybean study maybe.
Yes. And one thing we had out there real quick is we had a 4 miles an hour, 6 miles an hour, 8 miles an hour, and 10 mile an hour planted. On corn. We'll see what happens there. We see some really interesting stuff. A lot of doubles and skips, and when you go faster, and you can see right to the row as you start slowing down the planter. So just interesting stuff. I think you guys will be interested in.
Yep. Good, really good plot. There's lots of good stuff going on out there.
And we'll wrap up here with this quick update here. As we wrap up, I want to urge you is feel free to holler at us anytime. We're glad to come out and take a look at things. Maybe it's something you have a curiosity on why it looks like this year. This is a little bit of an unusual year. So do stay in touch with your advisor, the people that help you, because these are some things we're not seeing a lot with the cool and dry.
Yeah.
Like it has been.
Really abnormal.
This extreme for sure.
Yeah.
So.
Always one extreme to the next.
Yep. This is Missouri, so the state of misery. Let's sometimes. Let's wrap this up.
Yep. Thanks, Wendell.
Yep. Thank you. See you next time.
Everyone, thank you for joining us today on Agronomy Moment, a Top Ag Services production. If you want alerts on what we are finding in the field, go to topagservices.com/signups to receive alerts, or subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's our goal to bring you the most recent and advanced information possible. If you have any questions or feedback, feel free to reach out to us anytime. We also ask you that you give us a like and follow our channel wherever you listen to your podcasts or watch these videos. This ultimately helps us reach more people like you.
Hello?
Hey, this has been Wendell Cohen, your show host. Thank you to all who made this show possible. This show is over. See ya.